How's it going? I'm Saul. I'm going to teach you how to brew some beer. First, you got to gather the materials, like yeast. Second step is to make some sterilant. In this case, I'm using Star San. Keeping things sterile when brewing is so crucial, so that you don't end up brewing something that you didn't mean to. If you don't keep your brew sterile, it'll end up tasting like anything, depending on what happens to be in the air and landed in your wort. I try to soak everything I'm using in sterilant, including my hands frequently. Among the things you will need are hops, and lots of it. Malt extract, in this case powder form. A large spoon, and a pot to cook it all in. You can use a thermometer, or like mine, a built-in thermometer. And a chair. You'll also need grain, in this case barley. So you'll need to remove the grain from the bag, put it into the grain bag, and put that into the pot you plan on cooking in. The grain bag is mesh and is sold at most brewing outlets. Water, the essence of life and the foundation of beer. I'm filling my 15-gallon pot to about 12 gallons. Aggravating the grain bag is a good idea because the body and the color of your beer is going to come from the grain. I need to rinse out my carboys that have been soaking in sterilant. So I sterilize my hands, I sterilize the vessel to get the water into the carboys. I'm always making sure that any form of contamination is dealt with. Anytime I remove the vapor locks, I use a rag to seal the opening to the carboy. I'm rinsing the carboy out now to get rid of any sterilant that happens to remain inside. I don't want to drink sterilant. I'm taking care to rinse all sides of that bottle. Looks okay, but I think it needs one more rinse. Better. Much cleaner. I think that's fine. I get the vapor lock, rinse it off, and put it in the carboy. Now that one's done. On to the second one. Now it's done. The second one was just like the first. During that time, the grain was still steeping, and now I come back to agitate it once again. I light the flame, and the heat is on. I walk inside and find out my wife has cooked me breakfast. That's awesome. Thanks, babe. Now to eat breakfast, watch a nice flick about Marginal Mark, and wait for the brew to heat up. Once the wort reaches 170 degrees, you remove the grain. You let any of the juices in that grain drain into that wort. Squeeze it out with a spoon, whatever you gotta do. But all of that belongs in the brew. Once you remove the grain, continue to heat the wort. Once it starts to boil, turn the heat down, add the malt extract, and stir it up. Make sure that malt extract is completely stirred in. Once it is, you're golden, and you can turn the heat back up. Now to add the hops. I'm going to start off with 2 ounces of Centennial hops, one of my favorites. I'm going to boil this for a little while until I feel like adding more. But normally, you'll boil this first hops for the first 50 minutes. Now I add more hops because I like hops a lot. Now I'm adding even more hops for the last 10 minutes of the boil. I put this coil in to get rid of the heat later. I hook it up to the hose. I boil that radiator of sorts in the wort so it all becomes one and sterile. I add the last bit of hops for the final minute of the boil. One minute later, we're done. I'm going to turn the heat off, and now is a crucial time to keep everything sterile. You don't want anything in the air landing in your beer, so you must cover it with a rag soaked in sterilant. I used the clips that were soaked in sterilant as well to make sure that rag does not fly away or move or let anything in there at all. You've got to treat this like a science experiment. You don't want any variables at all. I soaked this tube in sterilant because I'm about to use it to transfer the wort to my carboys. I turn on the water, run it through the copper coil, and it takes the heat out miraculously, transfers it to the buckets. Physics in action. Man, it's amazing. On another note, chickens love grain when it's done being boiled for your beer. They are really big fans of grain, barley in particular. So there you go. Also, get rid of any hops that is spent because dogs can be poisoned and can die if they eat any of that spent hops. So definitely get rid of that. Now you get your sterilized tube. Make sure it's free of sterilant. Hook it up and use it to transfer your wort to your carboys. All of these rags I've been using are soaked in sterilant. That's important to note. Also important to note that this is food grade sterilant. That wort being transferred to those carboys already looks like beer, but trust me, it's sweet. It's not going to be beer until you add the yeast, and we haven't done that yet. now that this wort is cool, this is the most dangerous time as far as contamination. Now is the time to be extra careful about being sterile. You want to make sure that that wort never hits the air. Once you're done transferring it, put the vapor locks on, bring them inside, keep it sterile, but add sterile water to top them off. Once they're topped off, you can shake them up to mix the solution. Later, take the yeast, soak it in sterilant so that the outside isn't contaminated. Open them up and put them inside. Notice I shake the carboy to make sure any yeast isn't stuck in the inside of those bottles. I slide paper bags with a hole in the top over the carboys and put them in a cool, dry, dark spot for 2 weeks. As the beer brews, the vapor lock will release the CO2. After the beer has brewed, you need to sterilize the pony keg. Once it's sterile, make sure it stays that way by using a sterilant rag to seal the opening. Next, you siphon the beer into the pony keg from the carboy, making sure everything the beer touches is sterilized. Once the keg is filled, you hook it up to your beer fridge and you're good to go. That beer tastes awesome. Here are some written instructions on exactly how to brew a basic batch of beer. One suggestion is to take a picture of this with your iPhone and always have it on hand. Here is a recipe for an IPA if you're into that sort of beer. Anyway, happy brewing.